We often believe that our given family, the ones we are connected to by birth, should be our greatest friends and allies. And it's normal for us to expect our family members to love us and keep us safe. But in real life, many people discover that negative family dynamics affect them in the most troubling ways. If this resonates with you, you may have experienced the deep pain of feeling outcast or isolated by the very ones you love with all your heart. So whether you feel as if you don't belong in your family, your friend group, your work setting, or any other area of your life, you'll find great comfort and wisdom in this very special podcast episode. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. I've been in therapy before, but it didn't help a lot. But at least I realized that I'm mad because I'm an outcast in my own family. I was the black sheep who got in trouble a lot. I got sick of it and I disconnected from them. But now I'm totally isolated because I don't have real friends. Can you talk about this on your podcast? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manly, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manly, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Please note, as this episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes. Today, I'm joined by a very amazing guest, J.F. Benoist, who will be sharing his experience as a mental health and addiction expert who has also authored the best-selling book, Addiction to the Monkey Mind, and his latest treasure, Avive, An Adventure in Belonging. Welcome to the podcast, JF. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be here, Dr. Carla. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Before we launch into the real meat of today's podcast, would you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you, you?
What a beautiful question. I think I've always had an incredible desire for connection. And early on, even as a teenager, I felt like a lot of my close friends who had difficulty in their family, if their parents went and got a divorce or things like that, I'd be the one that they would come to and talk to. So I think I was raised in a very sort of chaotic family. And because of that, I felt like there was a lack of connection, and that kind of lit me up to make sure that I was going to live a life of connection. And I feel like that's been my path, really.
That is absolutely beautiful. Almost like a mission of connection, a life
Yeah,
mission, so to
very
speak.
much so. Yeah, and it can be really hard because I remember at the beginning where my close friends in high school would come and I'd be their confidant when we were just one-on-one, but then they would have a tendency to make fun of me when we were in a group setting, and because they were embarrassed, right? And so that's like early on, it was like I couldn't figure it out, right? I was at that age, I was wondering, am I doing something wrong? Is this me? And then, of course, as I grew older, I finally figured it out, but it brought a lot of insecurity around this desire for real connection and knowing that for me it was very real, but then doubting it when these kind of behaviors happen in group settings.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I'm thinking it's sometimes my private practice, I have certain themes, in the week that seem to come up with clients. And last week it was this theme of connection, of feeling like friends were talking about them, even in adults, where you would think in adults, groups, we would maybe have learned to refrain from that behavior, but really pushing away people who want to be included. And it is difficult enough, as you say, in elementary school, grade school, high school, where there are cliques, and it can be so horrible to
Mm.
be to have that sense that you're not included, that you're trying to belong somewhere and you can't quite get there. And the listener of today, that question, I don't know the gender of the individual, but it really resonates with me in a sense that growing up, there used to be this book, it's actually still out there. I bought a copy called Are You My Mother? I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember that one
Yeah, I
with,
do.
going from, area to area. Are you my mother looking for a family that felt, and it's interesting because even though it's definitely a children's book, it still resonates with me as an adult. And I grew up in a very big family with 10 kids, and parents didn't have enough energy for all of us. And I was way at the, tail end of it. So that sense of not belonging started very early in my life. And so when we look at this individual, their sense of not belonging comes from acting out and maybe being targeted, maybe acting out because he was targeted, she was targeted, we don't know. But and this is funny that I slip it immediately to it must have been a male, but um, it's interesting, isn't it? This sense of belonging is so
Mhm.
important to us because it's that primitive need, that very primal need to feel safe, to feel protected, to feel loved. And that's so many people feel badly that they have that need. Like, I should be tougher than that and stronger than that. But what are your thoughts on that, JF?
Hmm. Well, I think that's the greatest illusion that we all buy into our society, basically. I mean, one of the things that for me, I've been on this path to dispel this myth actually, because so in my book, Avive La Vie, we follow a main character who basically he's raised in what we call in therapy insecure attachment. And what that means is that his mother prioritizes connection over any correction of his behaviors. So she always makes sure that the connection is there. And over the years, when I ask people, do you ever recall, right? Let's say you come home and you had bad grades. Do you ever recall the parents asking you, are you okay? How are you feeling? Usually, what people report is that no matter what has happened, the parents go directly to the behavior. So they attempt to correct the behavior, and we are raised in such a way that our parents are thinking that they're doing good by doing that, right? That they're going to raise a good person. But what they don't realize is that most of us already have a conscience by the time we're 3 to 5 years old. And so we already know, how the correction in terms of survival, how to behave properly. There's still some modification that needs to happen, but what we're really forming is our confidence as far as being lovable, being valuable. And so then because there's so many correction, we start attaching our value and our sense of love based on meeting those corrections that we're getting along the way. So everything from you're not going to wear that to school, suddenly I start attaching my sense of worth on what I wear or what I don't wear or how I present myself. And it's endless. I mean, if we looked at the way we were raised, we would be stunned how many corrections they were every day. And what took a backseat is connection every time. And so if we learn in our lives, and this is the path of this beautiful journey that I share in Avive La Vie, is that we can actually change this dynamic to learn to prioritize connection first. And there are two main ways in which I talk about connection. One is the connection to ourselves, which is a connection that's related to how are we with our emotional body. Are we in tune to our emotions? Are we knowing how we feel from moment to moment? And are we comfortable with those feelings? Or are we reacting from them? If we're reacting, we're not really connecting. And so learning to deeply connect with how we feel and honor that as an experience, it's a form of attunement that changes everything. And once we learn to create that level of connection with ourselves, we can actually do the same with other people. So then we can become more vulnerable, open with others. And then we establish a depth of connection that is so fulfilling. It's actually what we crave most. It's as important as food and water, really.
Thank you for that detailed and beautiful foundation. And there are many components of it that I want to explore to give our listeners a deeper and richer understanding because you have such a beautiful flow way of explaining it, yet there's so much underneath it for us to
Indeed.
process. But before I get into my slew of questions, I do have to say I've had the privilege of reading Avive Lovey, and it is such a beautiful book. And it is one that adults can surely read, teenagers can surely read, and it has a storybook form, a story form that makes it one that you could read it to
Hmm.
younger kids, and they would be processing it at their own level. And I think it's also a great, emphasizing it as a great parent-child book
Hmm.
and a great self book and also a great book for relationships, for
Hmm.
partners to read with each other or to each other. Because I think when we read stories of this nature, they help us go deep on a very real level, but one that is touching the soul and the psyche very gently. It's not a
Hmm.
sledgehammer approach. And we all love I guess I should speak for myself. I would like to speak for myself. I love stories. And so, again, if for anyone who's watching on YouTube, you can see the beautiful book cover behind JF, Avive Lovey. On the other side is a little posting that says, "Free your spirit and dance with life." So that seems to be just a beautiful piece to bring into today's podcast, this energy of freeing our spirits and dancing with life. And that is the sense that I really get from your book and your way of working. It isn't about making scary progress or,
Hmm.
you know, making yourself bad or making your parents bad or your family bad. It is about freeing the self from the chains of the past and creating new healthy dynamics that set your spirit free.
Absolutely. It's so incredible how, most of us have been so ingrained in our conditioning that it's hard to separate ourselves from, like, who are we really if we are not subscribing to the narrative that just runs its course on a daily basis, you know? And part of what I discovered is that even in therapy, right, we're often focused so much on pathology, on the habit of, okay, I got to help you with this problem, right? You're struggling with this. I see your trauma. I see all this. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. And at the same time, what's important to notice is that, like in research, it is shown that they were studying what makes the most difference for people in therapy. And what they found is 70% was based on the connection, not the method, not what the therapist was trying to accomplish, but truly the connection. So what does that tell us if we listen to that? Is that at the nervous system level, we're busy questioning our sense of self-worth and our sense of lovability. No matter what situation we're faced, when we are triggered, when we have big emotion rise up, that's underneath what's happening. And when we have somebody who takes the time to connect, so not fix the problem, not change ourselves, not thinking that we have to be any different than we are, but actually meets us right there where we are. It's like a miracle every time. I observe it every time. And the nervous system is in that moment experience a soothing. Oh, so I really see and believe that what we need most is to reestablish a connection to the nervous system to understand that we don't need to be any different than we are. We actually need to connect with the pain that we live, through every day, And at the same time, understand that we are not that pain, right? We all receive some form of trauma, but trauma just shows up in the present moment because we're triggered by a situation. But what all trauma have in common is this sense that we're not quite okay the way we are. And if we can reestablish just that, it begins to solve the majority of our problems, because then we can take care of the difficult situation when we have this sense of confidence about who we are.
100%. And again, you're saying so many lovely things. I too am a firm believer that as important it is to have training behind you so that when you're practicing as a clinician, you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
As Carl Rogers said way back when, it was empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard for the client that made that big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Being focused, giving that individual your full presence, which, let's take it back to the secure connection, secure attachment versus insecure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Secure attachment, those parents were more often than not really present. Not perfect. This is never about being perfect, but more often than not, present and attuned. And as you said, how was your day? How are you feeling? How are you? The insecure attachment tends to have a much higher prevalence, as you said, of the critical nature, the not seeing, too busy with other life tasks to see that other person eye to eye, as you and I are seeing each other now. If I was looking away and reading a book while I'm trying to do a podcast, you wouldn't feel very seen. And if I'm trying to talk to you and you're looking at your phone, you know, I'm not going to feel very seen or engaged. And if we imagine that that happens, we can't expect our loved ones, partners, friends to be making eye contact with us all the time and tuning us into all the time. But when we are present, being present, just present with love. And the other piece that you were saying that I really think is so important is also being present first and foremost with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people run from themselves. And
There's a deep fear of the vulnerability, right? There's so many beliefs that get in the way of thinking that having emotion or feeling a sense of inadequacy is some kind of weakness, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. I don't think I've ever met a human being that from time to time doesn't feel inadequate, doesn't feel insecure on some level, you know, and there's something really precious when we're able to recognize that it's actually okay. And it's more than okay. I believe the doorway to our greatness exists in our wounding. And when we access the wound, meaning like not trying to change it, like I said earlier, not trying to fix it, not trying to make ourselves better, but literally noticing that this is a wound that was adopted along the way. Like, I'm giving an example. Like in the book, I talk about these 6 false belonging habits. And those habits, I really was able to recognize them because I ran like an addiction treatment center, right, for 12 years. And I kept observing as I worked with my therapist, I kept saying, are you aware this pattern just keeps showing up and this other one? And eventually I was able to see, oh, these are patterns that exist in the fabric of our society. And of course we inherit them, right? So there's the performance habit. There's the self-neglect habit. There's the habit of pushing love away. There's the habit of using anxiety as a way to be a responsible human being. There's self-doubt, which is a form of wanting to belong. It's just like if I doubt myself, but I listen to you more than myself, then somehow if I get it right, then I'll belong. And there's this habit of rejecting our feelings. So what all these habits have in common is that they're seeking they're seeking truly a sense of belonging. We want to belong, but I call them false belonging habit because they are based on the behavior. They're not based on being ourselves. And so when we keep doing these behaviors, we get temporary relief, but then it just vanish, and then we're back on the wheel again, trying to get to the next one, the next one, the next one, And let me give you a personal example that I think can illustrate that. One of my main false belonging habit is using anxiety as a way to belong. And a lot of people don't understand this because it sounds strange. But imagine anxiety is often anticipating bad things to happen, right? It's like being scared of possibilities that might happen. And so I was raised with a mother who was very overwhelmed, raising 3 kids on her own. One kid that was sick all the time. My older sister had epilepsy. And so she was in the hospital and got a divorce, married to an alcoholic husband. I mean, just very messy, right? So my mother would blow a gasket on a regular basis, like on a daily, she would just come at me and just have an outburst. And so what does my nervous system learn? It learns, okay, I need to anticipate a blow. And so in order to belong, I need to anticipate something bad to happen. And then I need to manage it. And if I'm successful, I'm managing this blow, then I can belong because that was my environment. So then later on in life, those false belonging habits are so ingrained that we don't realize they now live in our own heads, right? And so I could be receiving an email and my brain will go, oh, something's about to happen, or I'm trying to read what could be happening that's bad in the email. And it's my attempt to belong, because if I anticipate that bad thing, right, then I'll get a sense that I'm okay and that the other person's going to be okay. In reality, what does it do? It just perpetuates a state of anxiety where there's never a sense of relief, really. And it's exhausting and it's crippling to live that way, right? And so realizing, and I think you said it earlier, that my goal in writing the book was to make it so relatable. So each of these false belonging habits are, explicitly shown through characters. And I've got so many incredible reviews already from people who are saying, this is me. Like I see myself in this, this is what I do. And it's a relief, right? To begin to understand, okay, so maybe I don't need to be different, meaning that there's nothing wrong with me except that I've just learned this habit. And if I just learn to pause the habit long enough to be me, then everything comes back to being okay. And then now I have a real basis for belonging, which is just being me with all my flaws, you know?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing that personal example because it is one that comes up often in my work and with anyone who grew up with, especially an alcoholic parent, any addiction in the family. Often it's a dad, sometimes it's the mom, sometimes it's both, where they were walking on eggshells, waiting for the other saying I hear is waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so even though the parents may now not even be in the picture, maybe they passed away, in their intimate relationships, they are waiting. Even if the other person is not a threat, they are waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so that false belief then becomes a dynamic, or they're trying to make it a dynamic in the interpersonal relationship. And I agree with you that if they can recognize that this is a false way to belong, to have something to cling to, some sense of belonging, if they're able to free themselves to just be, realize they're engaging in this habit, in this case, one that is really destructive for, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's not a healthy habit for any part of our well-being. And I think that it's so important the way that your book illustrates it so that we can all find pieces of ourselves in these elements that you speak about and in the characters, because the characters, we are all human and we are all imperfect. And when we are able to just accept that and say, I'm imperfect, and that doesn't mean I can't love or be lovable. It simply means making peace, freeing the spirit from all of these handcuffs that we took on early in life. I mean, we
Yeah.
become so handcuffed consciously sometimes, but largely unconsciously. And
Hmm.
your work really helps the unconscious come alive. And that's what I believe are the power of stories, because stories can help the unconscious do work behind the scenes and find freedom.
That's so true. And the other thing I think is important to understand is that I think most people have this sense that they need to do this on their own. Like we go to therapy and we think, or even in our relationship, well, you go work on your stuff, and I think that there's a certain amount of truth in it, which is, yes, we do have to be willing to do our own work and look at ourselves. And the piece that I really know that makes the difference is that then once we have more awareness about ourselves, we actually need to do this process with other people. And let me give you an example. I know now this false belonging habit so well of anxiety. Like in the book, the character at some point, Rowan is the child that's raised in secure attachment. And so he creates connection with all these people and they all heal because he's just himself. And when he's dealing with the character who's overwhelmed with anxiety, his name is Tate. And he says at one point, he goes, Tate, he thinks his marriage is going south. And and Rowan points out, he says, well, actually, your stress, he calls his stress his mistress. And he says,
I remember
your
that.
mistress is costing you a lot. And Tay goes, what? Like, what are you talking about? And so one of the things that is, oh my gosh, my life is so different now because I expose this side of me to my wife consistently. Like, even like a little saying that I use with her, I'll say, hey, can I tell on myself? And then she knows exactly what it means, right? And what it means is now I'm about to tell you these crazy anxious thoughts that are running through my mind, these scenarios that I'm making up about some disastrous possibility about Joe or Susie or whatever. And then I literally breathe into them and I said, gosh, this is going far, isn't it? And we can both laugh at it. And sometimes I get reassurance and I'll say, is that even possible? And she goes, no, I don't think so.
Thank you for sharing that, JF, because I am 100% in agreement with you. Individual therapy, family therapy, couples therapy, it's all important, all so helpful. And the must is that we take it in and practice it in the world. It's, and I'll use this example, it's like taking on learning gymnastics. And I go to gymnastics class once a week and I try and walk on that balance beam and then I'm done and I don't try it anywhere else. Well, I'm not going to make much progress. But if I take an exercise and practice walking on things that look like balance beams and maybe get a balance beam and walk on one at home and walk on curbs and maybe try standing on one leg and doing it, sure, I'll feel vulnerable. Sure, it will feel scary. And to me, in my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, that's the piece I tell people. When you take this work and take it into your intimate relationships, where you are most vulnerable, with your partner, with your best friend, and that's where our rawness is. And when we're able to do that work on a person to person basis, outside the therapy room, outside of reading the book, and take it and practice it, and with someone that we can trust, someone who more often than not will attune to us and look at us, and as your wife is doing, as I try to do in my relationships, to listen, to be there, to reflect back, to maybe offer a guiding light, if nothing else, just light and warmth. That is where the vulnerabilities that we all have, they're able to come out.
Yeah.
And we realize we are not our mistakes. We are not our anxieties. We are not our pasts. We don't have to be stuck in those old anxieties and fears and stressors. That's the beauty of learning, as you do when you say to your wife, can I share, can I share this with you? And I will do that with my husband. I will say, gosh, honey, this is what's going on for me. This is what I'm afraid of. This is blah, blah, blah. And for me, from the way I grew up, that's very different behavior from the way I was for many years. I had to learn that behavior. And I
Hmm.
also had to learn who I could use it with. We can't share that way with everybody. Some people will turn and hurt us with it, but people who really love us, who really care for us, will take our little weaknesses and owies, and they will hold them.
Mm,
And
absolutely. And it's important to, there is a, there's something I think that a lot of people kind of confuse themselves around, which is when we are truly vulnerable, there isn't any defensiveness in that experience, right? So if there's any sense that we're pushing back, then we have to realize that's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is when I own something about myself, a feeling, an experience. I don't use blame language. I say, like I use facts. I can say to my wife sometimes, you've asked me to do three things. And now I'm like scared because I'm running this story that somehow I'm not enough. Now that's vulnerability. That's exposing something about me. And what I notice is it's really difficult for another person to get mean when we are truly vulnerable. Most people will, unless they're a complete narcissist, which that can happen,
yes,
it's not what we think. Vulnerability creates connection every time. And of course, like you said, we have to have discernment because oftentimes, if you're in a work situation, it might not be, you have to read the room. It might not be the appropriate time or moment, to have a moment of vulnerability. Yet it's essential to well-being. It's what creates true fulfilling in life is when we're able to expose our underbelly to each other and then see each other and sort of recognize that it's like, isn't that interesting? We're all wounded. It's like, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to run away from. It's not,
it's the fact of being a human. It is one
yeah,
thing that every single one of us has in common. We are not
absolutely.
perfect. It is, and it's beautiful. It's so freeing. So I do want to pivot to the question of today. That listener, and thank you for this gorgeous foundation that is so relatable and is very connective in nature. And before we go back to the listener's question, I do have to say thank you for calling out that there are some people who are either have narcissistic personality disorder or are on that far end of the spectrum, wherever there is a lack of empathy, which
Yeah,
is a hallmark of, NPD, that lack of empathy, those aren't the people. If you're being vulnerable, they might dive in and get you all the more. They might try and
right.
use those vulnerabilities. If you're crying, they might, actually try to do more damage. And that's not the kind of person, listeners, we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who has generally good mental health and generally good emotional intelligence. So that disclaimer said, now let's move into our dear listener who is feeling, and, I know this person isn't alone. There are so many people out there who feel like they don't belong in their family, in their friend settings, all of these different areas of life. What would you or Rowan, the the securely attached character in Avive La Vie, what are some pieces that we can share to help put some light on possible steps?
I think the most important is to realize that one person, just one. So my recommendation would be is that there's there is, if you take a good look at your life and take a look at even perhaps the people that you can go meet in different settings, but make it a point to find one person that you can actually just be yourself with. Because our sense at the nervous system level, when we experience that level of rejection, like when we feel that far gone, it's crucial to the nervous system to have an experience. That's another thing that's been really well established in research, that when people have suicidal tendencies, if there is one person that shows up for them, more than 85% of them will not follow
Mm,
through. And all it took is just one
yes.
person, right, that is present and that can hear you and accept you just the way you are. I know for sure that we can all make an effort to find this even in the hardest situation. So definitely make it a point to create one good connection. The other thing that I would recommend is I mean, an animal would do that too, you
I
know?
was going to ask your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer that an animal.
absolutely.
Well, I have a giant schnauzer he's actually at my feet right now. And, my neighbors, have pets, and people who have a horse or can touch a horse or pet a goat or adopt a neighbor's cat for an afternoon or take animals for a walk if you can't have your own pet. Volunteer at the Humane Society, anything like that. If you're feeling very isolated, starting with animal connection is often, and the other piece is if you're walking a dog, I get more people trying to connect with me than I want because of my
There you
dog. It's
go.
like
That's
too
so
much.
true.
So, for someone who's looking just for one connection, just going for a walk, borrowing a neighbor's dog if you can't, have one of your own, or those are little steps, but they're so important.
Yeah. And the other aspect is to know that it's extremely healthy to have your boundaries. So I have many clients where their parents are, every time they're with their parents, they keep re-experiencing their, sense of rejection, a sense that because the parents tend to be critical and just focused again on so much correction, even the person's an adult now. And it's important to have strong boundaries. It's important to say to yourself, wait a second, I'm learning, right, my own self worth. And in the process of learning my own self worth, I really don't need to hang out with people who are going to criticize me. It's like that's not going to help me, right, lift myself up and find a way to really truly be okay with myself. So don't be afraid to set clear boundaries.
And it's absolutely essential. I agree with you, especially when we're doing healing work. Sometimes distance to get a nice, strong foundation, and then maybe there can be an attempt to go back. I'm not talking here, listeners, about anyone who is abusive. If somebody is being verbally, physically, financially, sexually, spiritually abusive to you, a hard, strong boundary until there is real change done on the other side is absolutely appropriate. But
Hmm.
for others who are doing their work or on a journey or trying to be better, you can slowly create, if it feels right to you, points of contact to see if a connection might work again.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I
And it
agree
doesn't
with
mean, yeah, like you're saying, it doesn't mean that you eliminate them out of your life permanently, like you said, unless they're extremely abusive. But that finding our sense of confidence is something that requires a lot of discipline initially when you've had a lot of rejection in your life. Do you remember that? I'm going to kind of tell on my age here, but do you remember the movie Rudy? You ever seen that movie?
no.
It's a true story. It's really inspiring. And I saw him when my son was a teenager. We went to see him speak at a college, and the story was he was really short and kind of chubby, and he wanted to play for a Notre Dame football team, but his brother would beat him up and tell him that he wasn't good enough and that he was too short and he'd never make it. But he ends up anyway. It's a beautiful story, but he ends up playing for the team, and it's like his experience. was that he had to cut off all of these relationships where he was put down. And he found a connection through this pastor who helped him graduate from college, right? And so when he was speaking at the university, he was saying, he's looking at college students and he's saying, do you ever have an idea about something and you're really excited and then your friend just puts it down and just tells you that it's stupid or whatever? And he said, I have news for you. He says, that person is not your friend. It's not your friend. And I thought, wow, it's like, this is very simple, right? It's so simplistic, but yet there's an aspect of it that's so true. It doesn't mean that all our friends that criticize our ideas mean that they're not good friends, but that at the core, when we truly have support, something happens within our nervous system where we align with, oh, yes, it's like, when we were kids, would any of us laugh at a kid that's playing restaurant and it's presenting a plate of plastic to you, but for them it's a plate of spaghetti? It's like, no, we all go along with it. We all go, yeah, of course, because there's an innocence in there, right? And so there is this magic place that exists in all of us that's still there about the ideas we have, the things we want to do in life, the thing that inspires us, the things we want to do. And so when you've been down, you got to protect that. You got to really, really protect it and find
Absolutely.
that one person and lift your spirit up and then learn to build it from there.
Absolutely, JF. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the listener, and if this individual, well, they are feeling outcast from their family, they're feeling as though they were, always the black sheep. And so my sense would be, I don't know any more than you know about the person, but that it may be likely that they're afraid to open their heart to friendships because their
Mhm.
experience of love equals criticism, love equals being cast out, love equals not belonging. Well, why would you want to love people if that's what you learned that air quotes love does? I'm a believer that the way we figure out who is really our friend, who is really a loved one, is by action. Not that we want anyone to have to be perfect because we are imperfect, we will do imperfect things, but are they overarchingly supportive? Are they overarchingly attentive? If they have something to say to you that might benefit you, do they bring it to you in a constructive way? Or
Mhm.
are they doing it in a hypercritical way? Are they trustworthy? Do they keep your confidences? These what I call the pillars of friendship, and we want friendships in our romantic partnerships too. But key among those are things like integrity and respect. And in our world, we've used the word friend to cover anything. Some people
Mhm.
have 3,000 friends or 20,000 friends on Facebook or wherever. And I look at Dunbar's numbers, and Dunbar's research is extraordinary. And he talks about how we can, at most, have 5 intimate connections at a time, at most. And if we have a romantic partner, it takes up 1.5 of those spaces. And so we can see, depending upon whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or where you are in your journey, as you say, one intimate connection, one person that you feel safe with, where you can say something and feel that they are interested and that you can trust them, and then work and work. You don't have to be vulnerable with them right away. You can take baby steps to see if the person earns your trust. Trust is earned. We have to see love as an action verb, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. If a parent's hitting a child and saying, I love you, but they're hitting you and ramming your head, into the sidewalk or whatever, I've seen horrible things like that. That we can see, well, that parent's definition of love isn't quite what I want to have in my life and what I want to carry forward for me and for people in my world. And so that is part of the work that we can all do to create our definition of what love really looks like, and then match with people who have that same belief. How does that
Mhm.
sound?
It's beautiful, and it's honoring, it's self-honoring, it's self-love, it's compassion towards the self. It's so important. If the world around me doesn't understand that being, being true to oneself has nothing to do with a behavior. Like you said earlier, we can all make mistakes, but
Mhm.
our mistakes are not the way we define who we are, right? And so when we've been around people who over focus on our mistakes, we end up attaching our sense of self with those behaviors. Or, sometimes I even look like, I think for a lot of people, my wife has extremely high standards, which is a wonderful thing. She really does. And sometimes those standards from me, I end up taking them personally because I just think that I'm not enough, right? If I wash a window and then she says, "Did you wash that window?" And I say, "Yeah." And then she'll come around and just show me in different lights how I didn't. So it's just like, but is it possible, right, that my sense of worth can be attached to how I clean the window? That's how the brain's been conditioned. It's
Yeah.
insanity, right? So we have to step away sometimes
Yeah.
from these constant bombardment of the same conditioning that we receive in order to find the truth that we can never be a behavior. And that's something that clients tell me over and over again, that they feel so relieved when they hear that. It's like, yeah, you're not a behavior. It's not a possibility, you know?
Absolutely. And I love your example because it's so easy to make the dirty window your fault, your problem, your insufficiency,
Right,
instead of seeing it as, oh, my wife wants clean windows. She's got
right.
clean windows. Okay, let's go back and clean them again. It's okay that it's not a reflection, no pun intended, the reflection of the window, not a reflection of you, but just her desire to have a sparkling window.
Yeah,
And it gives us so much more ease and grace. And so back to our listener, that question, I love your advice just to take baby steps to build connection with a pet, with a neighbor, with someone at work. Go out on a coffee, a coffee lunch with someone, or a coffee, I don't want to call it a date because it doesn't have to be a date, just a coffee meeting. Or go for a walk with someone and see if you can build your trust in yourself, feel your feelings, feel your anxiety, feel whatever's coming up, and see if the other person is indeed safe, if you can maybe release some of that anxiety. And I know for me, my greatest movement forward in life is when I've been vulnerable enough to feel my anxieties, feel my fear, and move through to the other side. It's
yeah.
painful. Sometimes it's darn dark, but the reward of knowing you are able to do that, it's incredible. I'm a very different kind of being today than I was even a decade or 2 decades ago. Why? Not by chance, but because of effort,
Mm,
right? And if we don't put effort into this beautiful journey of self growth and self evolution, as your characters do in the book, it's just a perfect example and a very deeply loving example of how this journey can be done in a stepwise, non-blaming, non-judgmental fashion. It's
mm.
just, you are such a talent, JF. Um,
Thank you.
so thank you for the gifts that you bring. Are there any other pieces you would like to offer, whether to the question of the day or any other piece?
Well, Avive la vie means live life to the fullest. And one of the things that I've learned is there's a fear that exists in the belly for most of us. And the fear is more related to our greatness than it is to our inadequacy. And so I want you to, for the listener, my hope, and this is what has changed my life, is that we can live in such a way when I say live life to the fullest, where we can feel that there's certain things that we are called to do in life, and in the belly, there'll be fear that settles. But it's not the same as the anxiety that runs through the conditioned mind. I'm talking about just a fear of, could I possibly do that? Right? So when we're talking about just that one person, it might be that you walk in the coffee shop and there's one person sitting there by themselves, and you get the like kind of a nudge, right? Oh, could I go talk to this person? But then don't let your narrative take over. Just simply, like what you said, it's like it's an action. Just take the action. So that ability to listen to that sort of, there's an essence in us that's calling us to be the greatest version of ourselves. It's always there. And one of the reasons that it's difficult for most people to tap into that is because we're not attuned to the emotional body, right? So that we haven't developed emotional intelligence. But once we do, we're able to separate anxiety and condition with true emotions that are actually helpful to help us live a healthier and more adventurous life. So
You've
that's
just
my hope for
thank
everybody.
you.
Avive
You've
la
just
vie means life to the fullest. So avive la vie.
beautiful. And you just, in that description you gave, you described the essence of my first book, Joy from Fear, about moving through our fears, especially our unrealistic ones, to discover the joy on the other side. And you also made me think, I closed my eyes for a minute as you were talking, because I could see our listener going in the coffee shop, feeling that, thing come up in the gut and just going and talking anyway. Making a connection, whatever it might turn out to be. And the reason I was shutting my eyes, it reminded me of what I've learned to do when I first started doing speaking engagements. I had that fear and like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And I learned to channel. It's like, oh, I'm here. I have a gift to offer. I want to share my gift, my speech with people, my talk with people. And so I'm just going to channel all that energy into love. And then just going to take that fear, transform it to love, and let that gift come out. And it's changed my way of speaking. And we can imagine for anyone who is afraid of connecting, if you sometimes our anxiety, sometimes our fear lies to us. It is making us think that other person is the enemy. Our emotions, sometimes our feelings are sometimes lying to us big time based on old life experiences. And if we, as you said, put that running narrative to the side from the past, you've got to put it over here and just go with this gift of love and see what happens.
Yeah,
See what happens. And most people
beautiful.
want love. Most people. So, oh my goodness, this was so yummy. You're such a delight. Where can our listeners find you?
Well, there's one, I think the main channel that I'd like to invite people to come and join me is on YouTube. I have a talk show called Avive la vie. So it's at Avive la vie. And what I do is I take usually one person at a time and I help them see how we can attune to our emotional body and how we can develop emotional intelligence. And so if anybody wants to learn how to do that, they can come on my show. I also have the website, avivelevie.com, and the book is available on all platforms, the audiobook as well. So go on Amazon and type in Avive la vie, Avivelavie, and you'll find the book there.
Thank you. And I must say the visuals are, it's a beautiful book. It is a beautiful book. So listeners, if you don't have a pen handy, don't worry about all of the links are going to be in the show notes. So not a problem. You can click on them to find JF. You will absolutely love his work. So thank you again, JF. It has been such a joy and a pleasure. Thank you for being with us today.
It was wonderful spending this time with you, Dr. Carla.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for sharing your time, your energy, your presence with us today. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, You have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanly.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manly wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.